It was supposed to be just another day in Rome, but destiny had other plans. The morning sun of March 15th, 44 BC, spilled over the marble rooftops of the Eternal City. Golden light danced across the statues of gods and heroes, touching the bronze likeness of one man who had come to rival them all, Gaius Julius Caesar. The streets below stirred with the hum of merchants setting out their wares, soldiers marching in rhythm, and senators carried in their litters toward the Curia of Pompeii. To the people, it was the heart of Rome, beating as usual. To history, it was the calm before the storm. Inside his villa on the Palatine Hill, Caesar rose before dawn. The scent of olive oil lamps lingered in the air. Faint sounds of the city drifted through the columns. For years, he had commanded armies cross the Rubicon and rewritten the destiny of Rome itself. To many, he was the savior of the Republic, the man who brought order after decades of chaos. To others, he was something far more dangerous, a man too powerful to be mortal, a living god who threatened to turn their beloved republic into a monarchy. As he dressed, his wife Calpurnia approached, her face pale in the half-light. "My husband," she whispered, "do not go to the Senate today. I saw it in my dream, your statue bleeding from 100 wounds and Romans washing their hands in your blood." Her voice trembled, her hands clutched the folds of his toga. Caesar smiled faintly, the kind of smile forged by decades of command. "Dreams, my dear Calpurnia, are the echo of our fears. The Senate awaits. Rome cannot pause for shadows." Yet for a fleeting moment his eyes lingered on hers, as though the certainty in his words did not reach his heart. Outside, the city was alive. The cries of vendors mingled with the echo of marching boots. The Roman Forum glistened under the morning sun, a theater of ambition where marble pillars hid conspiracies and whispers carried more weight than swords. Rome was magnificent, proud, and utterly divided. Beneath its glory ran a river of jealousy, fear, and silent rage. The Senate, the very body that once guarded the Republic, now trembled at the will of a single man. Caesar had become the embodiment of victory and control. Statues of him stood beside those of Jupiter. His image appeared on coins. His name was spoken with reverence or resentment. Some hailed him as a reformer, the father of a new Rome. Others saw in him a tyrant who would crown himself king. And in the shadows of marble corridors, those others began to murmur. As Caesar stepped out of his villa, a burst of sunlight struck his toga. Lictors, the guards who bore the axes and rods of his authority, waited at the gate. They saluted as he passed. The sound of sandals against the stone echoed like a heartbeat. From the balcony above, Calpurnia called one last time, her voice barely rising above the city's noise. "Please, my lord, stay home. The signs are ill." Caesar turned slightly, his face calm, almost gentle. "When have I ever feared the Ides of March?" he said, and with that he descended the marble steps, vanishing into the bustle of Rome. The narrator's tone deepens. That morning the city glowed with promise. But in the alleys near the theater of Pompeii, shadows moved differently. The men who had once cheered Caesar's triumphs now hid daggers beneath their robes. As Caesar's litter rolled through the crowded streets, citizens cheered his name. Mothers lifted their children so they could glimpse the man who had conquered Gaul, defeated Pompey, and brought wealth and spectacle to the city. But behind every cheer there was an echo of tension, an unspoken question: how much power is too much? The sun climbed higher, reflecting on the Curia's polished stones. Birds circled above their cries, faint but eerie in the stillness. Somewhere a soothsayer called out from the crowd, "Beware the Ides of March." But the sound was swallowed by the laughter of soldiers. In that moment, the world seemed frozen between triumph and tragedy. Caesar straightened his robe, gazing toward the Senate hall that awaited him. His stride was steady, his gaze unwavering. He had faced armies, storms, and betrayal before. What harm could words and politics do to a man who had conquered nations? He could command legions, rewrite laws, and bend the Republic to his will, but not his own fate. The crowd's cheers still echoed in the distance as Caesar's litter disappeared through the marble gates of the Forum, but beneath the sound of celebration, Rome itself trembled. Only months earlier, Julius Caesar had ended a brutal civil war that had torn the Republic apart. Pompey the Great was dead, his armies scattered, and Caesar, once a general defying the Senate, had returned as its master. The Senate, powerless to resist, declared him dictator perpetuo, dictator for life. To the Roman people, weary of chaos, it was a gift from the gods. To the men in togas who had once ruled the republic, it was a nightmare made flesh. The city stood divided. In the streets, citizens shouted his name like a battle cry, Ave, Caesar, savior of Rome. They threw laurel leaves in his path and hung banners praising his victories. To the common man, he was a hero, the soldier who fed them, the leader who promised land, jobs, and order. But in the marble halls of the Curia, whispers spread like smoke. Senators saw in his every decree a shadow of kingship, and in his every smile the glint of ambition. Rome had sworn to never again kneel before a king. And yet every statue, every coin, every decree seemed to proclaim that one already ruled them. Caesar's reforms were sweeping, too sweeping. He restructured debts, expanded citizenship beyond Italy, and began centralizing authority in his own hands. He dismissed corrupt governors and appointed loyalists in their place. To some, it was the dawn of a stronger Rome. To others, it was the end of freedom. At the Senate, meetings' unease thickened the air. Old patricians exchanged nervous glances as Caesar entered his lictors, clearing the way with rods of office. He spoke not as one senator among equals, but as a ruler whose word was law. He planned massive building projects, colonization efforts, even the expansion of the calendar itself, creating what would become the Julian calendar. But the more he built, the more resentment rose beneath the surface. Among those watching him closest was Marcus Junius Brutus, a man Caesar trusted like a son. His ancestors had helped drive out the last Roman king centuries earlier. For Brutus, liberty wasn't just a word, it was his family's legacy. Caesar had pardoned him after the war restored. His honor even called him the most noble Roman of them all. But deep within Brutus, pride and loyalty waged a silent war. Could a man love Caesar and the Republic at the same time? Beside him stood Gaius Cassius Longinus, sharp-tongued, calculating his pride, long wounded by Caesar's rise. "You bow too easily," Brutus Cassius once murmured as the Senate cheered Caesar's latest triumph. "Do you not see? Today he wears a crown of laurel. Tomorrow it will be gold." Brutus frowned, uneasy. He loves Rome. He seeks only to heal her wounds. Cassius's reply cut like steel, then why does he hold her by the throat? And there was Decimus Brutus, another of Caesar's trusted men, commander, friend, and soon betrayer. To Caesar he was family, to Cassius he was a key. Decimus's loyalty wavered, torn between gratitude and ambition. Beyond the Senate, Rome buzzed with contradiction. Gladiatorial games celebrated Caesar's victories while graffiti whispered discontent. "Caesar the King," some wrote on the city walls. Each morning slaves were ordered to scrub the words away, but they always returned. Caesar himself sensed the tension, though he dismissed it with his usual confidence. "They fear what they cannot control," he told Antony over a goblet of wine. "But Rome needs strength, not compromise." Antony nodded. "And yet even strength casts a long shadow." Caesar laughed. "Let them talk. The Republic is safe as long as I draw breath." But even as he spoke, the currents of fate were already shifting. Cassius met quietly with senators in darkened rooms. They spoke in cautious tones, voices barely above whispers. Their goal was not revenge, it was preservation. At least that's what they told themselves. One night, as torches flickered in the atrium of Brutus's home, Cassius pressed his hand upon his friend's shoulder. "Brutus," he said softly, "your name alone can save Rome. If you stand with us, the people will see not murderers but liberators." Brutus turned away, his face hidden in shadow. "He trusts me," he murmured. "He loves me." Cassius's eyes hardened. "And he loves power more." Outside, thunder rolled across the city. The wind carried dust and the faint cries of revelers celebrating Caesar's latest decree. Yet beneath that joyous noise, something darker stirred a plan, taking shape, a destiny unraveling. And in the shadows of the Senate, whispers turned into plans. The whispers had grown into voices, and those voices now gathered in secret behind marble doors. In the quiet courtyards of Rome, beneath the watchful eyes of stone gods, the conspirators met. The air was thick with the scent of oil lamps and fear. Each man's shadow trembled on the wall as if history itself were watching. Brutus, Cassius, Decimus, and more than 60 senators leaned close over a table scattered with scrolls. No words were written, nothing that could betray them, only whispers sharp as blades. Cassius spoke first, his voice low but steady. "Tomorrow, when he comes to the Senate, it ends. The Ides of March will be our salvation." One senator shifted uneasily. "And if the people rise against us," Brutus looked up, his face pale yet resolved. "Then we remind them Rome belongs to no single man." Silence followed. The decision was made. Outside, rain began to fall over the city, tapping against the roof tiles like 1,000 anxious hearts. In the distance, thunder rolled across the Tiber, echoing through the narrow streets where torches flickered. The conspirators dispersed into the darkness, cloaked in secrecy, their footsteps swallowed by the night. As dawn approached, the city seemed to hold its breath. The day would be like any other, or so Rome believed. Inside Caesar's villa, the atmosphere was tense. Calpurnia awoke, trembling, her dream still burning behind her eyes. She found Caesar already dressed, gazing out across the courtyard as the first light of morning painted the columns gold. "My lord," she said, clutching his arm, "do not go today. I saw you, lying in my dream, your blood pouring from wounds and men rejoicing above you." Caesar turned to her, his expression soft but distant. "Calpurnia, you worry too much. I've lived too long to be ruled by dreams." "But they are omens," she insisted. "The augurs warned you, the sacrifices show ill signs. Please stay. For me." For a moment he hesitated. Her words found a place between his pride and his unease. Perhaps it was exhaustion. Perhaps the gods whispered too. He ordered a messenger to tell the Senate he would not attend. But fate has a way of knocking twice. Soon after Decimus Brutus arrived, his friend, his confidant. "Caesar, what is this?" I hear Decimus said with practiced concern. "The Senate waits, the people whisper, and you home because of a dream." Calpurnia glared at him. "His life is worth more than the pride of senators." Decimus bowed slightly. "My lady, fear is unworthy of Caesar. If he stays away, they'll call him weak, superstitious, even cowardly." Caesar's jaw tightened. "Cowardly. You are Rome," Decimus pressed gently. "They must see your strength. Go, if only to silence them." And so the messenger was recalled. Caesar took his toga, white and gleaming, and draped it across his shoulders. As he left, Calpurnia's voice trembled from the doorway. "At least send guards." Caesar turned once more, smiling faintly. "When has the Senate ever harmed its own?" The city stirred as he made his way toward the forum. Hooves struck the cobblestones. Bells rang from distant temples. Crowds filled the streets, waving olive branches and calling his name, "Hail Caesar." They cried, their voices rising like a tide. He waved to them, his expression calm. But inside, something heavy lingered. The air felt colder than usual. Even the wind seemed to carry whispers. As his litter approached the theater of Pompey, he glanced toward the towering statue of his former rival, Pompey the Great. It loomed over the courtyard where the Senate now met, a silent witness to their unfinished rivalry. The irony was not lost on him. Antony, delayed by business elsewhere, would not arrive in time. Fate was clearing the stage. The streets narrowed. Senators gathered ahead, their togas drawn close. Cassius stood among them, his eyes calm, his hands clasped as though in prayer. Brutus walked beside him, silent, pale as marble. Decimus gestured politely toward the entrance, his smile tight. "Rome awaits Caesar," he said. As Caesar stepped down from his litter, the crowd erupted once more. Children shouted his name, reaching for his hand. The cheers washed over him like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Yet amid that noise, a soothsayer's voice rose faintly from the edge of the crowd. "Beware the Ides of March." Caesar paused, half smiling. "The Ides of March have come," he said lightly. "Yes," the soothsayer replied, "but not yet gone." He moved on. The marble steps gleamed before him as he entered the curia. Inside, the air was still. No chants, no laughter. Only the shuffle of feet and the rustle of togas. Senators surrounded him with rehearsed courtesy, smiles too tight to be sincere. The narrator's voice deepens the tone, dropping like the final notes of a drum. Inside, the Senate destiny waited, cloaked in silence and steel. The heavy wooden doors of the Curia of Pompey closed with a hollow echo, sealing Julius Caesar inside with 60 men who called him friend. As he entered, the senators rose to greet him, their voices polite but trembling, their eyes avoiding his. The air was unnaturally still, no echo of debate, no laughter, only the faint creak of sandals shifting on marble floors. Caesar paused, scanning the room. The grand statue of Pompey stood over them all, its cold, expressionless face watching as if it knew what was to come. "Let us begin," Caesar said, his voice strong, commanding. He moved toward his chair, the one reserved for the ruler of Rome. But before he could sit, Tullius Cimber stepped forward, bowing deeply. "Most noble Caesar," he began, "I come to plead for my brother who has been unjustly exiled. Grant his pardon, I beg you." Caesar waved his hand dismissively. "Your brother broke the laws of Rome. His exile stands." Tullius dropped to one knee, clutching Caesar's toga. "I beg you, mighty Caesar. Mercy is the mark of greatness." The lictors stepped forward, but Caesar gestured for them to stand down. "This is neither the time nor the place." His tone sharpened. "Stand up, Cimber. You dishonor yourself." But before he could finish, Tullius yanked at his toga violently. The fabric tore across his shoulder. For a heartbeat, the world froze. Caesar looked down at him, confused, and then he saw it. The flash of metal. Cassius lunged first. A blade gleamed in his hand, catching the light of the morning sun that filtered through the marble windows. Then came another and another. Traitors, Caesar roared, striking one away with his arm. The blade cut deep into his flesh. The chamber erupted into chaos, sandals scraping robes, whipping the sickening sound of steel against skin. The senators who had risen in greeting now circled him, their faces twisted with fear and fury. Each thrust of a dagger was accompanied by a gasp, a grunt, or a cry. The air filled with the sharp scent of iron. Caesar staggered backward, his voice still defiant. "You dare attack me here, in the Senate of Rome?" Cassius's face was pale, eyes wild. "You made yourself a god among men." Caesar fought to move to defend himself, but they were too many. Blood darkened his white toga, blooming like a crimson flower. He grasped at arms, shoved men aside, each movement weaker than the last. And then, through the frenzy, he saw him, Brutus. For a moment, everything slowed. The noise faded into silence. Brutus stepped forward, his dagger trembling in his hand. Their eyes met, one filled with pain, the other with guilt. "Brutus," Caesar whispered, breath heavy. "You too." It wasn't anger in his voice. It wasn't rage. It was sorrow, like a father betrayed by his son. Brutus hesitated, his lips parting, as if to speak. Then, with trembling resolve, he drove the blade forward. Caesar gasped. The strength left his body. He looked around one last time. The men he had pardoned, elevated, trusted all, now painted red with his blood. He stumbled backward, clutching his chest, and fell beneath the marble statue of Pompey, the man who had once been his greatest rival. As his body collapsed at its base, the irony was complete. Caesar lay dying beneath the shadow of the Republic. He had both built and broken. The room fell silent. The only sound was the ragged breathing of the assassins. No one spoke. No one moved. Cassius, his hand trembling, wiped the blade against his toga. "Rome is free," he said softly, as if trying to believe it. But freedom did not answer. Outside, the city hummed, unaware that its ruler lay dead on the Senate floor. The sunlight poured through the high windows, glinting on the pools of blood spreading across the marble. The statue of Pompey seemed to look down in judgment, its stone face unmoved. Brutus stood over Caesar's body, his dagger slick with crimson. Around him, the others breathed heavily, waiting for something, absolution maybe, or relief, but all they found was silence. In that stillness, the narrator's voice returns low and solemn. The Republic was safe again, or so they thought. The moment the blade fell silent, Rome itself began to scream. Outside the Senate, word spread like wildfire. The people who had hailed Caesar that very morning now gathered in the forum, their faces pale with disbelief. "He's dead," they whispered. "The great Caesar is dead." Shock turned to rage. Mothers clutched their children. Merchants abandoned their stalls. The crowd surged toward the Curia, shouting his name, "Caesar, Caesar," until the air shook with grief. Inside, the conspirators stood frozen. Their robes, once white, were now stained with red. Cassius's hand trembled as he looked at the body on the floor. "We have freed Rome," he murmured, but his voice lacked conviction. Brutus, pale and shaking, tried to steady himself. "People will understand," he said, quietly, as if to convince his own heart. "They will see this was not murder, but justice." But the city did not see justice. It saw betrayal. When Brutus and Cassius stepped outside, they were met not with cheers, but with screams. Women wept openly. Soldiers gripped their swords, unsure whether to avenge or obey. Rome's streets filled with chaos, torches, lit statues, defaced rumors swirling like smoke. Some said Caesar had survived. Others claimed he had ascended to join the gods. In the Senate, his body was taken away, wrapped in his torn toga. Blood still dripped down the marble steps. The republic they claimed to save was drowning in the very blood they spilled. Days later at the Forum Romanum, the people gathered again, this time for Caesar's funeral. The air was heavy with incense and sorrow. At the center stood a wooden platform adorned with flowers, laurel wreaths, and a single golden crown resting beside his lifeless body. From the crowd, Mark Antony stepped forward, his face shadowed with grief but burning with purpose. He raised his hand for silence. "Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears." The words cut through the noise like a blade. His voice carried across the forum, rising with emotion, as he spoke of Caesar's victories, his mercy, his dreams for Rome. He reminded them how Caesar had refused a king's crown 3 times, how he had filled their bellies and rebuilt their city. When the poor cried, Antony declared, his voice breaking. Caesar wept. The crowd erupted. Anger replaced mourning. People tore benches from the forum and built a pyre right there, feeding it with wood, cloth, anything they could find. As the flames rose, they threw flowers, shields, even their own tunics into the fire, crying out Caesar's name. Brutus and Cassius watched from a distance, their faces ghostly in the firelight. They knew even then that their republic was lost. From the ashes of Caesar's pyre, a new war began. Antony rallied the legions in Caesar's name, vowing vengeance. Brutus and Cassius fled east, raising their own armies under the banner of freedom. The republic they claimed to protect split into factions once more. Years of blood followed. At Philippi, under a crimson sky, Brutus and Cassius faced Antony and Caesar's young heir Octavian, a quiet, calculating figure few yet understood. The battle raged for hours. Cassius, thinking all was lost, fell on his own sword. Brutus, surrounded and broken, followed soon after. The last defenders of the Republic died not as heroes, but as men defeated by the world they tried to save. And from the ruins rose Octavian, Caesar's adopted son. He took the title Augustus, the revered one. The Republic was gone. In its place stood an empire. Rome had traded liberty for order, debate for destiny. The Senate still met, but only to echo the will of one man. The people cheered, as they always had, for the promise of peace, no matter its cost. The narrator's voice softens heavy with reflection. They killed a man to save a republic, and in doing so, gave birth to an empire. The camera of imagination drifts upward, the city sprawling beneath the rising sun, the smoke of Caesar's funeral still clinging to the sky. A slow echo of footsteps fades through the streets, measured distant, haunting, power, loyalty, betrayal. A pause. The story of Caesar reminds us greatness always comes with a price. The music fades into silence, leaving only the sound of those footsteps, faint but eternal, marching on through history.